Welcome to Businesswomen Australia podcast, the podcast for ambitious women who are serious about business success and leadership development, keen to increase their knowledge and skills.
So welcome to another episode of Businesswomen Australia podcast. This is a real special episode. I mean, all episodes are amazing, but this episode, we're really going to be focusing on the area of networking. What does networking mean? What does it mean to us? I mean, I've got Jessica Schubert, who is here joining me. She's developed an incredible global network as well. We're going to talk about some of the myths, the mistakes, the things that maybe we've done that in hindsight has taught us a wonderful lesson. And of course, how you can adopt some of these approaches too. And of course, we would want to welcome you to come and join both Jessica and I at one of our upcoming Businesswomen Australia's in person. Like, I don't know whether we've been able to say that for quite some time in Melbourne, have we, Jessica? An in-person event, which is something that we're really going to enjoy meeting many new faces there. So, Jessica, introduce yourself, because some people may not have yet heard about you and the wonderful work that you're doing.
Yeah, so my name is Jessica Schubert. As you can tell from my name, and you probably hear it from my accent as well, I'm not from Australia, but I live in Melbourne. It's my home, but I'm all the way from Germany. Haven't lived there for 20 years, but certainly grew up there. I have a corporate background. I used to work in the commercial real estate industry, and networking there was really, really important, especially in, the remit of where I worked in business development. And I worked all over the world, but all over Asia, certainly in New Zealand, Sydney, Melbourne. I spent 6 years in Hong Kong and Japan. So I really started building my network throughout Europe and then Asia. And 2013, I made the decision to work with people, and I launched my leadership practice called Intact Teams. So I help leaders to have better conversations and build more effective relationships in their teams and in their organization. So building networks and personal branding for people who work in organizations or run their own business is something that's close to my heart, and that I help people with. In particular, women, Annemarie, they keep on coming back to me and say, we want more. I want to do this better. I need more confidence.
Yes. One of the things that I have heard quite a bit, and I'm sure that it's still relevant or prevalent today, just in your conversation or your comment that you mentioned, women have approached you and said, we need to do this better. One of the things that I heard, that men typically, they intentionally network. They go to certain events because they know they're going to meet people, and from that, conversations will come out of that. Whereas women tend not to go to some of those networking events, and it may be because, a number of different reasons, I'm sure. But once we realize, look, there's some key ways that we can continue to network. I know women have got a lot of different things that they're juggling, not just work, career, and so forth, but also family. But once we do that intentionally, we can still fit that in. And even if it is at a smaller scale, if you will, in the comment here in the introduction, I mentioned, one of us is a self-confessed introvert. That is me. I'll put my hand up. And so for me, one of the misconceptions, I'll share one, and then we'll go to you, Jessica, and hear some of the things that you've heard, and hopefully we'll bust through, is that as an introvert, I'm not naturally gifted in the area of networking, and therefore I don't think networking is really going to work for me. But one of the things that I've learned over the years is that networking really is about building relationships, and the way introverts build relationships are quite different, and that's okay. Recognize the gifts and skills and strengths that we have, develop those closer relationships, maybe with fewer people. But the whole concept of networking and building those connections is still very relevant for introverts as well. And we're probably going to be more nurturing, over a longer term than say extrovert. And by the way, we're not comparing introverts to extrovert, who's better and all that. Both have real gifts and talents, leverage them. What about you? What are some of the things that you've seen, Jessica, that you want to bust through these myths when it comes to networking?
Yeah. Well, one of the big myths, and you just already mentioned that, we think networking is, an event I go to with my business cards and I have to work the room and I have to talk to complete strangers. It is such a small part of networking. But I think it intimidates people, in particular women, who probably have a bit more of a confidence problems sometimes, but also fitting it in with, looking after the family. So going to a networking event at 6 o'clock is just something they think it doesn't fit in, to their life. Whereas when you say, actually, let's look at networking from more of a holistic way. Yeah. So one myth for me is it's just networking events. Networking is building a network of connections, that help us, and we help people, in a two-way relationship to work more effectively, to be able to ask questions. It's not so much just, getting to know new people. It's not a numbers name. When we say, your network is your net worth, what we actually mean by that is the quality of your network. How can that help you? So busting that myth for me is always be networking. Yeah. Every opportunity that you have, it doesn't matter if you work in an organization or you're in a business, every interaction, every conversation is an opportunity to network and build something. And when you look at it from that way, it gets much easier.
Yes. One of the things that you said in that, and I want to pull that apart a little bit, you mentioned around confidence. I think that's so true. Now, we're not saying that women are not confident. However, what I have found, and this is true for me as well, if I didn't have a goal, a clear vision, an idea of what networking meant for me, what I was going to get out of it and put into it, it's a reciprocal relationship, then it's like anything in business, isn't it? If you don't have a goal, if you don't have an objective, you can't set intentions and you can't be purposeful and intentional when it comes to networking. And you could very well pass up an opportunity that could lead to reciprocal areas of development, of sharing of resources, or even opening doors to have conversations with referral partners, alliance partners, or even customers. What are you, firstly, I'd love to ask you, Jessica, is that what you have found? And what are a couple of things that you've done perhaps that you've gotten clear, you've set that intention, and because of that, you've grown this global network? I'd love to hear those things.
Yeah. So I was really unclear about all of that. And I wish I would have known some of this stuff about 15 years ago when I was working for, a global leader in commercial real estate. I was just networking organically. And that's what I see most professionals do in their businesses or when they're, employed. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's always something organic about having conversations with people around you. But it becomes much more effective when you have that, what you call the intention and the plan. Because what I wasn't doing really well in my role, where I wanted to really move from a, salesperson, a general manager, to a much more strategic leader. And there were two things that were missing for me. I wasn't connecting and networking with the right people in the organization who would, first of all, see what I could do. Yeah. So I was, sort of judged and managed and led on merit. Yeah. And I was really good at selling, but I was not working and, talking about my personal brand of the leader that I wanted to be. And that's a lot of the work that I do now with leaders, especially female leaders, because they come back to me, for this. And once I worked out, okay, because I thought I didn't get that promotion to the area manager. And I always thought, I can't believe I'm being overlooked. I wasn't being overlooked. I wasn't visible, and it was my fault. So I created, my personal brand over time of being seen as a strategic leader, and I built alliances within the industry, within the organization, and that really catapulted my career then when I was in Asia to the level where I wanted to be. Had I known this and had I done this more intentionally 15 years prior, my career would have looked very different.
I love the way that you said that. And Dean Carroll, thank you for sharing. 100% agree. Absolutely. And by the way, if you are watching and listening in the live stream and you've got a comment, if you've got a question, please feel free to pop it in the comment section. I'll see and I'll bring it into and we'll weave it into the conversation today. I love how you've mentioned that. And I absolutely 100% agree as well. And because for me, I think a lot of it has to do with mindset. We've kind of already talked about that before, but I know for me, there was a huge shift, especially especially probably not even 15 years ago. I would have to say that I have intentionally started networking more so when everyone went into lockdown, because I've realized that networking does not necessarily need to be face-to-face. We can obviously build relationships that way, and there's merits for both. But, online is certainly something. You mentioned something earlier, internal relationships. Often we think that networking and building those networks around us is externally, but I think the internal relationships are so important too. And you mentioned something there, Jessica. You said, you assume that if you worked really hard, and a lot of women do this too, if I work really hard, my successes are going to generate the outcomes that I want. Well, a lot of us are running our own businesses as well. We're not just in corporate. It's like saying I can be the best person in my area of expertise and not market. And no one's going to know about us if we're not marketing. And similarly with networking, we have to intentionally seek out the right people and develop a relationship with them. Now, one of the things that I know to be true for me, Jessica, and I love, and I know you're going to share more, and we're going to share with people how they can get access to this and so much more, build their own kind of strategy around what a network and building looks like through an event we're going to invite them to. But for me, I have to have like a process and intention that I follow, because otherwise I just don't implement that. What does that look like for you?
Well, for me, it's all about, I'll start with the intention. What's my intention of networking? Who do I have to, connect with to build that network? And it's not always, selling. It's actually, most of the time, it's not about selling. And it's obviously shifted from when I worked in corporate to now that I have my own business. But for me, it's about, how do I add value? And who's my ideal connection / client / ambassador for my own brand? And therefore, who do I, need and want to connect with? And when you have an intention, and that goes to, really, and that's your expertise, Annemarie, that's about building your executive and your personal brand. Yeah. That, what are your strengths? How do you add value, and what's your purpose? And I find when people think about it, they don't go to a networking event or an internal event where they think, what am I going to say to a stranger? For introverts, it's much harder to have that that one-on-one conversation. But when you think about, I'm just going to talk about, how I add value in this world, this conversation becomes much, much easier. So that really helps, and that really helps me to be intentional about it. But also really thinking about, what my ideal network looks like, and mapping it out. And I think what really helps there is to think about who you're not talking to yet. I find myself over and over talking to great influencers and ambassadors and prospects, and especially for people who work in organizations, think about the network that you haven't built yet, and be really specific about who you want to reach out to. That takes that pressure off, that you think you have to, connect to so many people. It's such a, what do you call it? The vanity numbers on social media. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you have 5,000, 10,000 or 100 followers on LinkedIn. If you use social media as one of your channels, it's about building sincere relationships, where it's about them as much as you. I just actually heard a leader in the financial banking industry, a global leader, saying in one of the workshops that we run, he gave this sort of insight and tip to, his organization of leaders. And he said, build networks not politically, but sincerely. And I really love that, because if it's meaningful, if you build connections in a meaningful way, there's much more in it. It's definitely quality over quantity.
Yeah, so true. And I think when you go with the mindset and with the approach of building networks sincerely and not politically, the way that you show up, the approach, your attitude is quite different. And that sincerity comes through. And I think especially now with what's going on on a global scale, people value those connections and those real relationships. One of the things that you said, I want to just draw people's attention, and maybe we can dive a little bit deeper into that. And that is clarity around who you wanted to build or connect with and build kind of that network around. Would you say that one of the reasons too that people may be struggling to build a real solid network that they can give to and also receive from is the fact that they haven't clarified who it is that they need? So many times I connect with people and they'll say to me, look, let me know who you'd like me to introduce you to. What can I do for you? And previously, when I didn't have an intention, I'd go, I'll let you know. And of course, I was never able to let them know because I didn't have clarity around that. People are genuinely wanting to support you, isn't it? It's just that you don't ask, or you're not asking the right way. Would you say that clarity in that is so important as well?
Oh, absolutely 100% agree, Annemarie. When I work with marketers, or, people who help me with my own, sort of marketing strategy, or other people, and they ask me, who's your ideal client? Like even 3-4 years ago, I was, I was quite wishy-washy. I'm like, yeah, sort of everyone. Yeah. You can't be everything to everyone. And it doesn't matter if you run your own business or you work in an organization. You have to be really clear on, who should be in your network. And there are different sort of, pockets or circles. So what I usually do now is I draw big circles where I put people almost in sort of categories. Yeah. Who are people who would be referrers? Who are people who, I give back to? Yeah, we always think about, another myth, like a network is people who help me to do something. It's also about giving back, right? I ask, growing leaders, I'm like, have you considered being a mentor and give back in that way and grow your network in that way? And often they said, I haven't even considered that. I could become that. Yeah. So where's your sort of giving back? Where's your, your circle and part of the network that could be your ideal client. But where are, peers and people who are, sort of working on the same level, in the same industry, or in the same position, but you're not necessarily direct competitors, right? So really looking, and your family and your friends are part of that as well. Every conversation is about just talking about how you help the world to be a better world, really, right? And having clarity around that. And something that you mentioned before, right? Widen your network, tighten your circle. Yeah, so work with those, close to us. There is some research done on how many people you can actually have a real connection with, and that number is 150. So you have your 15 really closest tribe, and then your 150, 1,500, 15,000, where it becomes sort of more vanity, and really being clear who you want in your top 15, in your top 150. And you'd be surprised, even senior leaders, if I make them go through this exercise, there's big gaps and holes in that, let's call it a stakeholder map. And once they work on that, they're like, well, it's very clear who I still need to connect to and have, deeper connections with.
Oh, I love that. Now, I'm going to ask you a few more questions about that because my ears have pricked up and I can see that I have not done that really well. But what I'm doing now is I'm just sharing, let me just get rid of one of this other banner. I'm just sharing a bit.ly link there, and that's going to take us to Business Women's Australia in-person event in April, just next week actually. Jessica, share a little bit more about what's coming up, because I know that this is going to be something that you're going to be directing, you're going to be sharing a lot more. So share a little bit more for those people who are in Melbourne and are thinking, oh, this is something that I would see some real benefit in.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are so excited, aren't we? Annemarie and I will both be there. It's our first in-person Business Women Australia networking event at WeWork in Elizabeth Street, Wednesday the 14th. Doors open at 6 o'clock. Of course, it's all COVID safe, and we will get together. So it's networking, in the flash. So first of all, you're going to have the opportunity to network, but I'm also going to share some real practical steps on some of these topics that we mentioned today. So you will walk away with clarity on how to build a network. Yeah. Why is it important to have a network? And I'm going to sort of take, with busting those myths, I'm going to take, that that perception of that networking has to be difficult. I'm going to take that out because I'm going to show you what networking really is and how easy it is, yeah, and how we just need to get a start through clarity and some real practical steps onto how to build your own network. It's very individual. We're going to talk about that personal brand bit a little bit as well, just so you have a start of a conversation that goes beyond a title, because, credibility goes beyond your title when it comes to executive presence. And we're going to touch on that as well. And then we're going to have some time to grab another drink and you can use this in practice and network with, the women and men are of course welcome as well, that you want to work with.
Yeah. What I love about that too, and an opportunity to gather, and I know you'll be sharing some incredible insights that we can all begin to implement immediately, is that when you get together and some ideas start flowing, others that you are having an opportunity to speak with can also share some of the things that they've seen working, some of the things that they've implemented. You just cannot get that level of insights unless you're participating and going to those groups. So I can't wait to hear what other people who are going to be joining us next week. So in April at WeWork Elizabeth Street, as you said, April the 14th. You mentioned something about, the work that you do when you're working with executives and they're mapping out that network plan, that what areas in your network is needed to be worked on. It's one of those things, isn't it? Unless we clarify that first and have an awareness of it, we can't intentionally go out and seek. And I'd imagine that as you've started to do that, the gaps that you had identified, people started showing up. Now, they were always there. It's just that you didn't recognize that, hey, this is a valuable person. I'm going to reach out and ask if they'd like to get together or whatever. Did you find that started to happen?
Absolutely, because clarity is the first step to, for us to do make the first step. And I find, and it's the way our brain works, right? When our brain is clear and we have an idea and we've got the confidence of, this is what's happened next. Yeah, our brains are, pattern recognizing machines, right? So clarity is the first step, but then also having a clear plan of, what we want to do first, who do we want to and need to talk to. But it's also, Annemarie, it's that conversation of, okay, so I know who to reach out to. What am I going to say to them? Yeah. And that's where sometimes I find people are held back because they don't know what kind of conversation to have. And the conversations are, and it's really changed so much as well, right? Conversations are much more around having a real interest in the other person, what's going on in their world, yeah, and, and helping them first. So when I go to networking events and I talk to complete strangers, and I have no problem with that. If anything, it really invigorates me because I'm so curious. So curiosity is something, if you apply that, a networking event just becomes fun because I just want to know who these people are, what's happening in your world, how was last year for you, what's happening right now, and how can I help you, yeah? That's when the conversation gets rolling. We don't have to always think that networking is, handing over your business card. As a matter of fact, most people don't have business cards anymore. It's you connect with your mobile phones on LinkedIn, right? And you don't have to, sell to them who you are and what you do, yeah? In the conversation, when it goes well, of course, always, valuable. It's probably the salesperson in me, but, asking that question. So, what can I do for you? Who's your ideal client, or who do you want me to connect you to in my network? And asking for that sort of back as well, right? We do go with the purpose of connecting with people, especially when it's an external networking event, to get something out of it, to build it. But the pressure comes off when you have clarity and a plan, and you don't think of selling yourself, but just being curious. Yeah. That's really powerful.
So good, so good. And, one of the things that you mentioned there about having that plan and then connecting on LinkedIn and some of those other platforms, networking today can be very much integrated across both in-person and online. And in actual fact, we really value that and encourage that too. And one of the things that I've often heard, and I'd love your feedback on this because I know that you've also grown a network that is global. What happens at the face-to-face networking event or if you're meeting online the first time, that is just a small portion of the networking and the relationship building, isn't it? You don't have to do everything and, there. And I think that will take a huge pressure off a lot of people. Oh, thank goodness, I don't have to sell. In fact, you've said don't. But that's just the start of the relationship building, isn't it, Jessica?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a start. The first conversation is a start. And it's, people will notice, human beings notice very quickly, do I like this person? Do we have anything in common? And therefore, it's always better to open with a question, and have that conversation. What comes after that, actually, and I'm going to talk about this next week when we meet as well, is sort of like, it's the consistency in backing it up. Yeah. So when we build networks and we meet interesting people, don't go home and think, oh, well, that's done. Yeah. I've done my networking event for the week. Yeah. Then it's about connecting with people and staying in contact with them. Yeah. Being able to show up as an expert on platforms. Yeah. The beautiful thing is that we have, internal social media platforms. Most people run, a Yammer or an internal Facebook. And of course, we've got, LinkedIn and other platforms as well. That when you are sincere about growing your network as a professional, then you're going to have to back it up and show up as an influencer and expert by, sharing, liking, posting, staying in contact. That's all part of networking. And I'm going to show some steps and examples. And again, it's just having a start.
It is. And Karen Tisdale, thank you for sharing. She said, love the tip around being curious. Absolutely. And she said, I found it very helpful, not just asking for introductions, but asking for permission to name drop. And as Jessica said, never sell and spam. Yeah, absolutely. And once you get clear on that, all of the things that you've mentioned, you've got this plan, and it's not a convoluted plan, because sometimes we can have so many different aspects in a plan or strategy that it just becomes overwhelming. But it's simply about what value can I add to my connection? Is there something in my initial communications that they may have said they struggled with? And imagine if you came across a resource, or you have someone in your network and you've asked them, look, can I connect you with someone because I know that they've got area of expertise which you're struggling with? That kind of thing adds real value, doesn't it? And I think sometimes we don't realize that it's the sharing of those resources genuinely, of course, and people can see through that if you're not being genuine, but genuinely, and opening up your Rolodex, even a virtual Rolodex, that can go such a long way to developing a solid relationship. Yes?
Absolutely. And I love how you say resources, Annemarie. It's not just connecting people with other people. That's a big aspect of it, but it's also connecting people with resources. The amount of times where I spoke to someone and we, got into a certain topic and they said, oh, that's so interesting. I read a really good book about it. Yeah. So I'm a lifelong learner, and I read about a book a week, on something leadership or human, and they say, oh, look, I'll send you a link to the book. Or if I do the same, then, follow up with that. But you can give resources to someone, not just by connecting them with someone else, but helping them with, your own expertise or something someone else wrote, or, and making a connection, in that regard. It's always helpful. Always have that, be curious, and always have the thought of how can I help this person first? The rest will follow. Because yes, people look through you very quickly if you're just there for yourself. It's about giving way more than taking.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things, I can't remember who wrote about this, but reciprocity, when you are giving and you genuinely share resources, open your Rolodex, connect people, the people who have received real value for that, we almost want to give back, because it's kind of like that, well, I've gotten so much value from that, how can I support you? And it may not, and this is one thing that I think is really important too, it may not happen in the first week of meeting, the first month, maybe even 12 months. But if you continue to seed and nurture and really build those relationships individually and online and so forth, it can pay off dividends. Just share a couple of successes, if you will, as we're coming to the end of today, and again giving an invitation to join us next week, where you're going to dive in much deeper into this. What are some of the things that have come out of the networks that you've built, Jessica?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that my networks, that they're always there and they're growing. What's been really successful is that I focused on the networks that are really deep. So my connections that are really deep. And it's interesting because other people sort of sometimes pull me up on, they're like, well, you know someone in Beijing and, oh, you used to work with them. And what's that connection in York? Where did that come from? And, and it's not always about, again, like selling each other or, it's staying top of mind, but being sincere about the relationship I have with them. So my biggest success is that I actually really care about those, networks. And I always think about when I work with someone, when, someone is my client, I always think about what can I do for them first? That's probably sort of the biggest success, but also, having that plan and going forward, being really clear of what I want. And I call it, and I stole this from someone else, but I can't remember who it was, but it was about widening your network and tightening your circle, and be really sincere about that, that tight tribe of people and being there for them. One of the biggest successes, and I see this with other people as well as now that I'm much more intentional about it, is when you start thinking about, okay, I have to grow my network. Yeah. I see this a lot in, when people work in an organization or they just start building their own network, build your network before you need it. Yeah. If you are looking at, changing your position, you want to get out and, maybe build a side hustle or go from side hustle to full business, grow your business, whatever it is. If you think to expand into another country, if you think bigger, you need to make sure that network is already built. So it's really important to start now, because we can't tap into people as we need them. Yeah. You have to have built that network. You have to have built that trust. You have to have given something to them so you can go back and say, hey, can you do something for me? When I ask my clients for a testimonial, that's not on the first day of the ever first workshop. I have worked with them for some time. Then you can ask for something like that. I ask for someone in my network, hey, you're in the area, I want to grow in, the West Coast of the US, do you know 2 or 3 people who, where do you think I can add value? But I don't do that with people I barely know. Yeah. So building the network before you need it, is sort of another tip that makes you way more successful.
It's so true. I mean, just having connections internationally, I think is fantastic. I know for you work a lot, and even in the area, how do different cultures work together really well as well? Now, if you've got different cultures and connections of different cultures, you can tap into them and say, hey, by the way, what is acceptable and what do we need to know about in your particular culture? Now, you can't just randomly go out and ask someone that, and you have a deeper relationship with someone, they're more willing to share and have those conversations. And I think, that's wonderful. We've got so many different platforms now that we can kind of manage. I know for me, one of the things that I have found is, how do I manage all of that? Like before, we might have like 1,000 business cards and it's like so overwhelming, but now we can have platforms where we can document, we can easily, what are the conversations, what are the dates, what are the things that you asked, or they asked to follow up on. So these things can really help us manage these things as well. Jessica, before we finish, can you just share one more time on how people can come to the networking event next week, where it is, the time, the date and so forth, and just an overview of what you're going to be talking about next week?
Yeah, so we're looking forward to welcome anyone. It's not just for women, but it's from Business Women Australia. You see the banner down there with the link. It's also going to be in there. I don't know if you call it show notes, but Annemarie will put it in the notes as well. So all you need to do is register, because you do need a ticket. And then you come to Business Women Australia at WeWork, level 4, 152 Elizabeth Street. It's on Wednesday, the 14th of April, Melbourne time, of course. 6 p.m. is registration. We're going to start with some drinks, and then I'm going to take about 45 minutes to take everyone through why networking is so important. Yeah, bust some myths, and will include and engage the audience well. So Annemarie, I will definitely call on you there as well, because I want to hear other people's success stories. But I will give some really practical tips on how to network more effectively. Take that myth out that it always has to, be hard and going out for networking. How to build those networks and clusters really well. A little bit about personal branding, because that's our substance, and then finish off with some tips on how to back it up, and share with the audience as well what works, things like curiosity, what would I say, what's the intentionality behind that as well. And then we're going to practice, and we're going to have another hour or so of actual networking, and we're so excited. We have a few spots left, so come and sign up. Would love to see you there. It's an amazing venue, and there's going to be an amazing group of women and hopefully men.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about Business Women Australia too, the culture that they have, from the leadership team, and I know we're on that. So, we're not saying something that we've observed it, but we've also really experienced it, is that it really is supportive. So if networking is something that really, it just overwhelms you, and it's something that you've avoided, come, because I'm the first person to put up my hand and said I never really enjoyed it that much, till all of a sudden I shifted some mindsets, and the curiosity one worked really well too, and using the gifts and strengths that you have to somehow really allow you to tap into that and then build networks that way. Now, Karen, I'm just going to share one other comment that she said, so true. She was saying to what you were saying, Jessica, you can't ask people if they've got a job opportunity or know your ideal clients on the first date. It's so important. Build those relationships, and they certainly will continue to pay off in dividends, especially now. I think now the whole collaboration, co-opetition is a word that I heard as well. There's no such thing, and you may find that the greatest collaboration that you have, maybe someone that you've met that is in the same industry as you. And these are all of the things that we're going to be talking about and more next week. So hope to see you there. I can't wait to meet you there again in person, Jessica. It's been, wow, like I don't know how long. It's been over a year, 12 months.
Over a year, yeah.
I think, since we last connected. So we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks, Annemarie. Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to Business Women Australia podcast. Want to become part of a dynamic collective of women who are passionate about business success and personal growth? Go to businesswomenaustralia.com.au/membership to apply. That's businesswomenaustralia.com.au/membership.